U.S. President Donald Trump wants to impose a 10% global tariff on America's trading partners after the Supreme Court struck out most of his previous levies as illegal. Trump said the 6-3 ruling left him deeply disappointed and accused the Supreme Court of being, quote, swayed by foreign interests. The president has vowed to deploy new methods to impose tariffs that will not require approval, including a sweeping new duty on all foreign trading partners.
To both regulate trade and impose tariffs.
DW's Misha Komadovsky joins me now from Washington. Misha, you have been following this story throughout the day. As expected, this decision did not sit well with the president. What else did he say at the press briefing?
You're right. President Trump lashed out after the Supreme Court blocked his emergency law tariffs. And now he plans to sign an executive order imposing a 10% tariff on all countries, replacing the tariffs that were struck down. He praised the conservative justices who dissented, Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh, as brave and pro-America. At the same time, he blasted the Supreme Court majority as partisan and unpatriotic, and even said that their families should be ashamed. The president added that they're bowing to political pressure and foreign interests and announced he will not stop. Let's take a listen.
Foreign countries that have been ripping us off for years are ecstatic. They're so happy. And they're dancing in the streets, but they won't be dancing for long, that I can assure you. But other alternatives will now be used to replace the ones that the court incorrectly rejected. We have alternatives.
What alternatives does he really have, and how wide-reaching would they be?
Well, again, President Trump announced plans to impose these 10% global tariffs under Section 122 in addition to existing tariffs. The U.S. Has never used this authority before, and the tariffs are scheduled to start next week. This Section 122 gives the president the power to put a tariff on imports up to 15% for up to 150 days. It's meant to help if the United States is losing too much money in trade with other countries, or if the dollar is in trouble. After 150 days, the president needs congressional approval to keep the tariffs going, and that's in question.
Now, has Trump offered any explanation on how he plans to handle the hundreds of billions of dollars already collected under these tariffs that have now been ruled unlawful?
Well, not much clarity here, at least publicly. The administration did not lay out a clear, settled plan for what happens to the money already collected. President Trump says tariff refunds issue could end in courts for years and years, and the Supreme Court majority opinion did not specify what should happen to the more than roughly $130 billion already collected. And mind you, this number is not settled, so it leaves the refund question quite open. The National Retail Federation here in the United States and the major anti-tariff coalition are both calling for full, fast, and automatic refunds, so expect more litigations.
There's Washington correspondent Misha Komadovsky. Thank you so much for your coverage today. We want to take a closer look now at these developments and what they mean for international trade and bring in Marco Forgione. He heads the advisory firm, the Chartered Institute of Export and International Trade. Welcome to DW. Now, one set of tariffs is ruled illegal, another is slapped right on. How is this 10% different from the so-called Liberation Day levies?
Well, it's a different nuance, and it's more wide-ranging, and it's short-term. The Liberation Day tariffs were meant to be until they were negotiated away. These tariffs, the 10%, are for a maximum of 150 days. But I think what we're going to see now is a very muscular approach to negotiation by the Trump administration with third countries, because they're going to launch now a series of trade investigations with a threat of much higher tariffs under the rules that the Supreme Court have said are legal.
Mm-hmm. In layman's terms, what will all of this mean for global trade? What will be the immediate impact?
the reality is we're seeing a continuation of what's been happening to global trade for the past 3 or 4 years. Ongoing instability, uncertainty, and disruption, which means price pressures for the consumers and the risk of availability and the shrinkflation for people on the shelves. This is just another reason for businesses, particularly those in the EU, to look at a multi-source, multi-market approach. We cannot be dependent on a single supply chain or a single nation, and we cannot be dependent on a single nation as our marketplace.
Yeah. Now that these old tariffs have been declared illegal, can importers reclaim the duties they paid since April of last year?
Yes, but, and that's the problem with so much in international trade. So yes, they should be entitled to reclaim what has been judged to be illegal tariff payments. However, the process for doing that and the fact that this is going to be tied up now in a whole bureaucratic process means that there's no clarity on this. And I think the best thing that companies can do is to hold fast and wait until a little bit more clarity comes, because it's very obvious that what President Trump is trying to do is to disrupt global supply chains, to disrupt the global multilateral order and impose an America First program of activities. And we've seen the impact of that. We've seen disruption to supply chains. We've seen businesses facing uncertainty. And as a result, big businesses, companies like Stellantis and others, have made decisions to invest in the US, to build their capabilities in the US, because of these original set of tariffs. And I'm certain that President Trump and the administration in Washington have no intent on taking their foot off the pedal, releasing the pressure, because they want more of that type of investment in the US to grow the manufacturing base in the US.
So do you think it's actually paying off? Because the intent of these tariffs under the America First umbrella was the revival of American manufacturing. Is that really happening?
Well, first, we've seen billions being generated as a result of the tariffs. We have seen huge announcements from companies like Stellantis and Roche and others that they are going to invest significantly to grow manufacturing capability in the US. But the transition between what have been decades of decline in US manufacturing and the impact of those investment announcements, there's a lag. So what we've seen over the last quarter, in fact, the last half a year, is a decline in US manufacturing output. We've seen an increase in the trade deficit. And these are factors that the Trump administration will be taking a long, hard look at as they seek to pursue that America First program.
Mm-hmm. Tariffs, and we've heard it many times, are Trump's favorite word. Zooming out a bit, how big a blow is this ruling for his overall economic strategy that was so heavily reliant on tariffs?
Well, anyone who listened to his response this evening could see he's really angry at what's happened. However, I don't think it was unexpected. And the fact that they've come forward instantaneously with a new approach, the 10% tariff for the next 150 days, and they will be launching trade investigations on a whole bunch of products, a whole bunch of countries to try and exert more pressure and to apply differential tariffs on them. And I'm sure over the coming weeks and months, there will be new approaches to impose tariffs, to put pressure on countries, because what he's doing is using trade and tariffs as a geopolitical lever, and he wants to secure bilateral trade arrangements to the advantage of the US, to the advantage of US consumers, to the advantage of US manufacturing. None of that changes. The way he goes about it may shift slightly. The legal basis for his approach may shift slightly. But what we can be sure of is that he is absolutely clear-eyed and determined to impose that America First agenda.
What a time to be a trade advisor. We just spoke to one of them, Marco Forgione, Director General of the Chartered Institute of Export and International Trade. Thank you so much for all those insights. For the German reaction to the Supreme Court decision, our chief political editor, Michaela Küfner, caught up with the CDU lawmaker and foreign policy spokesperson, Jürgen Hardt, at the party's conference.
Jürgen Hardt, is this ruling a game changer for the way Donald Trump can conduct international politics?
Too early to judge on, and I think also from outside it's difficult for us to comment a decision of the Supreme Court in a sovereign democratic country. Constitutional questions are always inner core of the sovereignty of a state. But looking to that, what might be the consequences, I think about that Donald Trump's tax policy is very much based on the fact that he has a huge income from tariffs, and that the trade relations of US to other regions like European Union or India, for example, are very much driven by the tariff system regime, and therefore I think we also have to think about what is the consequence for us. Maybe a new momentum in trade negotiations with the US, and also new momentum for some parts of the business, for their future business in US or here in Europe.
Does this change the way you perceive Donald Trump can act? Now there's a court ruling. Do you think he will stick to it?
I think Donald Trump was very much aware of not to have a defeat on the Supreme Court, and not to be a majority against him in the Congress. And there was a majority, close to a majority against him in the Venezuela question in the Senate. And now there's a decision of the Supreme Court. I think he has to think about what are the consequences for its politics up to the midterm elections. But we will see. Americans will take the right decisions and right consequences of that, what happened today.
Jürgen Hardt, thank you very much.